Our story starts with Cain's sproutling of an idea of a coliseum that continues to evolve and blossom into its final evolution. I will now continue to tell you the story of how Cain and Abel will find the champions for the Colosseum, their backstories, and the interactions that they have with Cain and Abel. Here we go. And we will start with Clive and Earl Wagner, the crazy duo. Clive was raised by a drug addict and neglectful mother and an abusive and alcoholic father. Clive would grow up to be odd at best and maniacal at worst due to this upbringing and the challenges that it brought. One day, a group of kids teased Clive for his awkwardness, and just when Clive was about to snap was when something happened. Something changed. As Clive sat there stewing, thinking of all the heinous things he could do to those kids, his outlook was forcibly changed by an aloof force. Mentally, he was still Clive, though this aloof force subdued Clive and emerged and began hindering Clive's maniacal machinations. Clive detested this aloof force, though they seemed to both consider the same body as theirs, though the aloof force seemed to be completely unaware of Clive's existence, which would be a fatal flaw. Unlike Clive, when the aloof force within Clive took over, people that interacted with this aloof force thought of him as a personable person. Though, if the aloof force were pushed into a corner mentally, it would black out with Clive re-emerging and handling the situation before being subdued again, before it regained consciousness. Throughout their life, Clive would find ways to take control, pulling off heinous acts to himself or others, such as when Clive would desecrate his shared body with the hateful ideas of his father and grandfather before him with tattoos, till Clive himself would become a beacon of hate written all over his skin. Time passed, and Clive found things to do to get by, including a stint as a volunteer firefighter, which would lead to the aloof force's continued growth. During Clive's time as a volunteer firefighter, he was goofing off at the firehouse when he put on a burn mask. At this moment, Clive's life would change as out of the aloof force was born Earl, who found it comforting under the mask. This job didn't pan out though, but Earl went forward as the pair went back to surviving. Eventually, Earl would find a job as an ice cream truck driver, which helped to pay the bills, but without realizing it, also gave Clive the perfect alibi. The time in his isolation as he was subdued, Clive grew into a maniacal state, as it led him to see people as his prey, instead of as human beings. On a night Earl went to bed early, Clive took over. After loosening his constraints, Clive decided to hunt for prey. On this night, the options seemed to be slim till he was approached by a stranger in a blue costume. The blue stranger came to speak to Clive about a competition, and he thought Clive would be the perfect champion in his Colosseum as it was about to begin. Clive thought about making the man in blue his prey, but thought that the yellow star on the man's blue outfit looked abhorrent, though the blue stranger would change Clive's mind as he told Clive that most of his competition wouldn't expect someone as bloodthirsty as he could tell Clive definitely was. Clive would agree, and was given a card with an address by the man in blue, who also told Clive to bring a vehicle and be ready for war. The man in blue stated that he couldn't wait to sit back and watch Clive's destruction. As he finished speaking, he disappeared into a cloud of smoke. Clive, thinking he had had enough crazy for the night, went back to his rundown house to sleep. Earl awoke in his bed hours later, though while groggily waking up, he began to hear a heavenly voice call out to him, The heavenly voice revealed itself to Earl as Jophiel. Clive would watch on confused, as it would seem Earl was talking to somebody, but Clive heard nothing. Jophiel would tell Earl about what was coming with Cain, but also filling him in to who Clive is and his intentions. Earl cautiously agreed to help Jophiel, as Earl became uneasy to if Clive knew of his planning. Clive wanted to survive this situation, but he didn't want Clive to keep hurting people, as that was bad. Jophiel would whisper an address in Earl's ear and told him to bring a vehicle, as the heavenly voice of Jophiel prayed for them both and vanished. Earl sat there on his bed, unsure and uneasy of his future. These are the two forces within one body, heading through on truly divergent paths, each with their own goal for each of their futures. Our next champion is Trent Corcoran. Trent was born and raised in an impoverished lower middle class upbringing. This led to Trent struggling to survive as he continued to age. Trent would become a high school dropout and wandered about for a few years. Eventually, this led to Trent earning his GED, yet he couldn't find a job and his struggle continued. When Trent had almost lost hope, when he saw an ad for a company called PestCon, after damn near terrorizing the on-call staff of PestCon until they pointed Trent online to fill out an application. Trent quickly filled it out, and to the dismay of the on-call staff, Trent was hired by PestCon. Trent knew he wanted to help himself, but also wanted to help others from crooked exterminators. Trent spent his time perfecting his craft as he became one of the best pest control applicants that PestCon had ever seen. Any home Trent visited never needed a second treatment, and was always hospitable to the persons that were his customers. Trent had just finished tenting a customer's house when he started to hear an ominous song. Trent put on his hazmat suit as he went back inside the property to check for the source of the ominous song. But as Trent walked through the door, he suddenly realized he wasn't in the same house any longer. And as he continued through it, he eventually found a bound young lady with giant wings and all white. Trent would ask the bound lady 2 questions. Who are you and how did you get in here? The woman in white replied, but Trent heard her voice in his head. My name is Abel, and I am an angel being trapped by my brother, and I need your help. Trent sat in a state of shock as he couldn't believe his eyes. Abel continued, something bad is coming, and this world needs the help of whomever I can find. Trent simply asked, what's coming? Abel replied, Armageddon, and my brother is trying to lead the whole thing. Abel became distraught as she began stammering as she spoke. We must hurry. I think my brother Cain is coming. You need to get out of here. But I must know, Trent. Will you help me? Trent shook his head yes in agreement, feeling as if he didn't, he might regret it. Abel grabbed Trent's hand as she traced something in light on his hand. Abel said to Trent, now quickly, get out of here before Cain sees you. Abel continued, so you know, Trent, you will need a vehicle for Cain's Coliseum, and be ready when you hear my call. And thank you, Trent. As Trent reached his exit, his pest bomb started going off and the house started filling with smoke. Trent looked around for Abel, but she must have already disappeared. But then he saw a little old gentleman shaking his head in disgust as he also disappeared. Walking outside, he took off his suit, climbed into his work van, and he figured he'd work until he heard Abel's call to action. Lastly, we have Daniel Shun. Daniel was given a privileged upbringing by his father, who tried to keep Daniel's record spot-free. Daniel, on the other hand, spent his time enjoying the fruits of his father's labor and embracing a thirst for sadism, which fueled his ambitions and his political agenda, and hopefully marched him right toward the Oval Office. Daniel would use his stroke where he would use reporters such as Tiffany Jenkins at his will and for his carnal desires, though using his stroke among his political party, where he would trumpet their resolve and their tainted hold on their beliefs, controlling his political party by either his fortune or by his ways of manipulation, and no one ever seems to dodge Daniel's silver tongue. Gian, Daniel's father, had grown many deep ties as he was a widely respected and loved man, while Daniel not only used his father's deep ties, but also used his generational ties, as he was a first-generation Asian American, though Daniel had been planning a family coup for well over a decade. One day, Daniel made his way to yet another boring political event. His driver showed up. As Daniel approached, the driver opened the door and shutting it after behind Daniel was in. Once the driver sat behind the wheel, he heard from Daniel, "Take me to this meeting quickly. It's in the Senate chambers." As Daniel finished speaking, he closed the partition between him and the driver, and then worked on making himself a drink in the back of the limo. Daniel sat back, taking a gulp of his whiskey on the rocks, when all of a sudden a large man in a blue outfit appeared out of nowhere. The blue stranger spoke. "Our talk is long overdue, Daniel." Daniel replied, "Do I know you, good sir?" The man in blue laughed as he responded, "Oh, dear boy, we have never met, yet I know all about you, and you have piqued my interests." Daniel replied, "Okay, so why should I not have my driver stop and throw you out of my car?" The blue stranger continued, "Let's just say I know you're behind in the polls, and I can give you the chance to turn the tides in your favor. Interested?" This piqued Daniel's attention as he pondered before speaking. "What are you offering?" The man in blue replied, "Let's just say I have the ability to turn things in your favor, Daniel, but you might have to do things that most would deem ungentlemanly." Daniel replied, "At this point, as far as behind as I am in the polls, I will do anything for the position of president." The blue stranger responded, "Good, that conviction will do fine. I'll give you a call when I need you." Daniel asked, "Do I need anything? And what's your name, sir?" The blue stranger replied, "I go by Cain, and all you need is a vehicle for some destruction." After the words left Cain's lips, he disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Daniel sat wondering what he just agreed to, but damn it, he wanted to be president.